Today's announcement comes on the heels of a survey released by a digital consumer advocacy group, OpenMedia.ca. They compile thousands of complaints, some horror stories from cell phone users. And joining us now is Steve Anderson, the founder and director of OpenMedia.ca. He's on your right. And Sean Hall also joins us. He represents Telus, one of the big players in the wireless industry here. Welcome to both of you. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
So why don't you start by telling us about some of these horror stories?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's thousands of people from across the country, and you could probably just ask someone on the street, and you get one from them. And I mean, some people wrote 14-page long stories. One woman had her legs crushed and then couldn't get out of her cell phone contract. It was actually Telus wouldn't allow her to get out of her cell phone contract and said, sorry, you'd have to die to get out of this contract. So there are some really passionate stories from Canadians and I think at the end of the day, the story is that our cell phone market's broken and we need bold action from Ottawa to fix it.
Sean Hall from Telus, when you hear those sorts of stories, what's your reaction?
Well, actually, I think the report really demonstrates that Telus is doing pretty well. I mean, I think that particular story happened well over a decade ago.
But it sounds like a terrible story.
Well, hey, and Telus is not perfect, but we're making great progress. Even though the results of that report were skewed towards Western Canada, because that's where you're based, that's where we're based, only 17% of the complaints that were brought up in the report were about Telus. So, hey, we're not perfect, but we've been making some real significant change over the last number of years. You know, really putting customers and our passion for customers at the core of everything we do. It goes back to 2009 when we introduced clear and simple pricing plans. We were the first carrier to do away with system access fees. Customers told us that we find contract language complex.
So let me ask you about the system access fee. Sure. You must have heard a little bit about that in the complaints. That always struck me as unnecessary and almost unfair. Like you sign your contract for, let's say, $30 a month, $50 a month, whatever it is, and then all of a sudden there's this additional system access fee, which to me was just a way of adding more profit for the cell phone providers. Telus got rid of it. You managed to survive without it. Does that mean it was never necessary in the first place?
Well, that fee used to cover government-related costs, like for spectrum and
things
like that. And that's what we did in 2009, is we wrapped that into the price because we'd heard that from customers.
So, but I guess my point is,
we've been listening to what customers are saying.
Doesn't that mean that the fact that you changed it, though, doesn't that mean that really you didn't need it in the first place?
It was a historical fee that went back to another era in the industry. We were hearing from customers that they didn't like that fee, so we rolled it into our overall plans back in 2009.
Now, you, I'm sure, would like the opportunity to say to a representative from one of the big companies, ask a question about a particular problem. Here's your opportunity on live television. Give us another example of a complaint that some customers have that they'd like to see resolved.
Sure. Well, I mean, one example, I mean, contracts was a big thing, 3-year long-term contracts. And one story that we heard was a woman's son who had Asperger's syndrome. Her son signed a contract, and then he didn't really know what he was doing, and then they called Telus and said, hey, can we change this contract? My son didn't really know what he was doing, and the person said sorry, and then long story short, they ended up going to a collections agency, and it basically created a huge drain on their lives. So I'm wondering, how can you guys improve your customer service to ensure that sort of thing doesn't happen? And is that just because there's only 3 companies in the market?
Well, I'm not familiar with that specific case, but what I can say is that we have thousands of customer service agents here in Canada, and they're really, we empower them to put customers first on what they do, to put customers at the center of what they do. And we heard from customers that they didn't like contract cancellation charges and those kinds of things, so we got rid of them. And instead, what we have is a device balance, where if you come to Telus, you have a choice. You can buy a device outright and just go month to month with absolutely no obligation at all. Customers have always had that choice. Or you can get a device on a subsidy, and if you want to move on from the contract, all you have to do is pay off that remaining subsidy, which is money that Telus has put out to purchase that phone. Now, whether it's an iPhone, a BlackBerry, an Android device, there's some really cool phones out there, and increasingly people are making the move to smartphones. I mean, we have among the highest smartphone use in Canada, if anywhere in the world.
People find the cell phone contracts, whether it's Telus or Bell or Rogers or any company, way too complicated. You know, you look through it, you need with a law degree, you can't really figure out all the fine print. But when
That's not true anymore. Tell us.
Well, how long are the? If I were to get a phone tomorrow from Telus, how many pages is the agreement?
I don't know off the top of my head exactly how long
it's not
it is.
one page.
But we heard from customers. We heard that from customers, and we got rid of the old language. We completely rewrote it. We heard from customers that they don't like activation charges. We got rid of those. Hey, we're not
because
perfect.
they were necessary, right?
Because customers didn't like them. The industry was evolving. We changed.
Let me give each of you a brief last word. We have less than a minute, and I'll start with you, and then I'll give you the overall last word.
Sure. Look, you can see it's kind of like whack-a-mole, where they remove something because people get upset, and then they put it somewhere else. And at the end of the day, the problem is 94% of the cell phone market is controlled by just 3 companies who pay some of the highest prices for some of the worst service. The telecom market's broken, so we need rules. We need good, strong policy from the government to ensure that we have independent options that are affordable from Canadians, that are independent from the big 3.
That's a nice way for you to end, and within 30 seconds, your last word.
I would say that it's actually mythology that the Canadian industry is uncompetitive and has high prices. That's just
you should ask Canadians.
That's just not backed up by the facts. Report after report after report, including one today that came out from Jeffrey Fenn at Scotia Capital. It just says that the Canadian industry pricing is about average for the developed world. We do pretty well. And at Telus, we're putting customers really at the center of what we do, and we're making changes based on what we're hearing from them.
I really appreciate the fact that both of you came in, and I hope we can continue this conversation, because virtually everybody watching has a cell phone or a smartphone, and I'm sure they'd like to hear more on this. So Steve Anderson, the founder and director of OpenMedia.ca, Sean Hall, spokesperson for Telus, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.